Hi, my name is Helena, and I want to tell you my story. I lived for 10 years with a man named Carlos, and during all that time, life was really hard for us. We struggled a lot. Nothing ever came easy. One day, he came home and told me he didn't love me anymore and that he was leaving. I was completely caught off guard. I asked what had happened, if I'd done something wrong, what made him change so suddenly. But he didn't explain anything. He just said it wasn't working anymore, that it wasn't about me, it was about him. Then he grabbed his clothes and walked out the door. I suffered a lot. It felt like the ground just disappeared under my feet. It hurt so bad. That was one of the hardest periods of my life. But time went by, by little I kept going. I had no choice. More than a year passed. I never saw Carlos again. I didn't hear anything about him, and honestly, I didn't even try. I didn't want to know anything about his life anymore. Until one day, I ran into someone we both knew, a guy who lived in another city. I told him Carlos and I weren't together anymore. He said he already knew and casually mentioned that Carlos was doing really well now and living in another city. At the time, I didn't really think much about it. But later on, I have to admit, that thought kept running through my head. A few days later, I decided to look him up, and I was shocked by what I found. Carlos had won the lottery. He had become a millionaire. He was living in a mansion, and he was married to another woman. And here's the part that really hurt. We were still together when he won the prize. I really wanted to let it go. I did. But it just didn't feel right. I mean, we lived in deep poverty. We shared a tiny 3-room house. We didn't even have a bed. We slept on an old mattress laid over some wooden boards on the floor. I spent a few days thinking about all of that, and then I decided to take it to court. I was able to prove, through people who knew us, that we lived together for 10 years, and that we were still together when he won the money. It was a long, exhausting process, but I won. He was furious. But what could I do? Why was it that with me, he only wanted to share struggle, hunger, fear, and uncertainty? That wasn't fair. In the end, he was ordered to give me half of the lottery prize he won back then, plus the interest from all that time. And that's how I moved on with my life, with what was also rightfully mine. So now I ask you, would you have done the same thing I did, or would you have let it go?